All right, welcome back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. No'al al-jumla, the two types of sentences in the Arabic language. Before we talk about the two types of sentences, let's do a very quick refresher of only the main. So what have we talked about up until now? We're going to do a crash course in the past for the past 4 lessons, starting with the very first one, just to refresh your memory a little bit. So the first thing we talked about is the word in Arabic is of two types, mu'rab and mabni, okay? And then mu'rab is of two types, ism and mudare. But then there are some exceptions for ism and mudare, which you can look up later. The mabni is 3 types, al-madi, al-amr, and al-harf. So every word is either mu'rab or mabni. So keep this in mind. There are no exceptions for al-madi, al-amr, and al-harf. For al-ism and al-mudari, there are exceptions. The next thing is states and signs. States and signs. There are 4 states. Every word has to, every inflected, every mu'rab word has to be either in the rafa state, for which there's a dhamma at the end as a sign. Now, dhamma is not the only sign. It is the default sign. There are other signs that are coming up. Or it can be in the nasab state, for which the fatha is the default sign, or it can be in the jar state, for which the kasra is the default sign. Now, keep in mind, jar is only for ism. Only ism can be in the jar state. Mudari cannot be. And the last state is al-jazm, for which the default sign is sukun. Now keep in mind, al-jazm is only for al-mudari. So the first 2 states are rafa and al-nasab. An ism can be in the rafa, a mudari can be in the rafa, an ism can be in the nasab, the mudari also can be in the nasab. Okay, so rafa and nasab are used for ism and mudari. However, jar is only for ism and jazm is only for mudari. So then we talked about pillars and non-pillars. And pillars and non-pillars, to quickly summarize, a pillar, mubtada and khabar are pillars. They're married to each other. If you see a mubtada, there better be a khabar somewhere in there. If you see a khabar, there better be a mubtada somewhere in there. Though both of them are pillars of a jumla ismiya, nominal sentence. On the other hand, the fi'l and its fa'il are also pillars. They're also married to each other. If you see a fi'l, there should be a fa'il. If you see a fa'il, there should be a fi'l. However, there's some exceptions like kana and laysa. We will talk about the exceptions. So that's pillars. Okay, when you think of pillars, I want you to think of 2 words to make the sentence correct. Mubtada and khabar, or fi'l and fa'il, and more details are coming. So that was just a general crash course, just to refresh your memories. And then finally, we looked at the general rules of inflection. In the general rules of inflection, what we talked about, there are 2 main principles and then there are exceptions. The 2 main principles are that if you have a pillar that is mu'rab, if you have a umda, mu'raba, then you give it the rafa state. Unless, of course, there's a nasib before it or a jazim before it. If there's a nasib before it, it goes into mansubs. it becomes mansub, it goes into the nasab state. If there's a jazm before it, it goes into the jazm state. Similarly, if it's a non-pillar, right? If it's an fadla mabniya, then you give it the nasab state. The exception being that if there's a jar, like a harful jar before it. So that's what we've talked about so far. With that in mind, let's now one thing I want to mention I want to emphasize again, the homework exercises, the practice exercises, the drills, there are a lot in the book, and they're the most important part of your learning experience, the most important part. You should not take a quiz unless you have completed every single one of the exercises. I've spent a lot of time researching and collecting the best material and content for exercises. So please make sure that you complete all of the exercises, then you take the quiz. That will give you the mastery, the fluency, and the best possible learning experience. You really will become good at Arabic language by doing practice exercises. And I've mentioned this before many times. Please read one verse of the Quran every single day after Salatul Fajr. Right after Fajr, pick up that Mus'haf and read one verse and ask yourself, where's the mu'rab, where's the mabni, where's the ism, where's the fi'il, where's the mubtada, where's the khabar, where's the fi'il, where's the fa'il, where's the harf jar, why is it mansoob? And you will come up with interesting observations. And this is a great way for you to learn. So let's now continue on with the lesson for today, which is the two types of sentences. Al-jumla. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-jumlatu, the sentence, naw'ani faqat, is two types only. Faqat means only. Ismiya, nominal, wa fi'liya, verbal. Ismiya, mubtada and khabar. Fi'liya, fi'l and its fa'il. And there are some exceptions and details that will be covered, inshallah, as we proceed through this course. So remember that. Now, I have a question. Sometimes I have a choice, right? I have a choice. Sometimes I can use ismiya, and sometimes I can use fi'liya. Like, for example, I can say yashrabu zaydun, or I can say zaydun yashrabu. Which one should I use? This lesson will help us figure out when to use ismiya and when to use fi'liya. من استعمالات الجملة الاسمية وصف الأشياء. From the common usage of الجملة الاسمية is describing things, وصف الأشياء, to describe things, وتعريفها, or to define it, والإخبار, informing. Al-ikhbar is akhbara yukhbiru, form 4. So al-ikhbar is master of form 4 on the pattern if'al. It means to inform. Inform about things or define things. What ta'bir? Another possible usage is to express anil umuri thabita, to express things that don't really change. To express things, umur, matters, affairs, athabita, that are permanent or stable, they don't change. So these are some of the common ways you can use. So if you want to describe something, if you want to define something, if you want to give information about something or state facts, right? Umur thabita, then it's best to use al-jumla al-ismiya. On the other hand, al-fi'liya, when do you use fi'liya? من استعمالات الجملة الفعلية التعبير, expression, عن الحدث, you're talking about an event, action, occurrence, something happening, في زمن معين, in specific time, أو عن حدث متكرر, or if you're talking about an action that takes place repeatedly or frequently. So those are guidelines, right? If you want to talk about an action, use fi'liya. If you want to talk about a definition, or you want to describe something, or you just want to give information about something, then generally speaking, you want to use ismiya. So let's break down ismiya further. As we have learned before, al-mubtada plus khabar is the bare bones minimum that you need to make a valid Jumla Ismiya. So Zaydun Talibun, I have the basic requirements satisfied. I got my Mubtada, Zayd, and I got my Khabar. Zayd is in the Rafa state. How do I know Zayd is in the Rafa state? Because there's a Dhamma ending. And I know that Zayd is an Ism, and an Ism is Mu'rab, and this is not an exception. And I know that I'm talking about Zayd. So that's the subject of the sentence or Mubtada. Talibun is Khabar, information about it. Talibun is also whoops, I don't know why I keep space. Okay, Talibun is also a pillar, and it's mu'rab, right? That's why there's a dhamma ending. So both of these are pillars, both of these are marfu, both of these are mu'rab, inflected. Let's continue with the Jumla Ismiya. Now here's some add-ons. I can make additions. I can add stuff. I can add words to the end. I'm not limited to Mubtada and Khabar. Remember, I mentioned that Mubtada and Khabar are just a bare bones minimum. Can I have an adjective? Sure, I can have an adjective. Here's an adjective. Al-insanu, the human, hayawanun, animal, not talking. This you will find in the books of Aqidah and philosophy and mantiq, logic. Al-insanu, the human being, is a talking animal. This is a definition of the human being. The human being is an animal. What kind of animal? Talking. So the word talking, natiq, is a na'at, adjective. And the adjective, I'm sorry, it keeps jumping. Shouldn't do that. And the adjective is a follower. Now, what do I mean by follower? It follows the state of the leader. It follows the leader. So who's the leader? The leader is hayawan, because that's what I'm describing with an adjective. And hayawan is in the rafa state because there's a dhamma ending that's indicating that this is in the rafa state. It's in the rafa state because it's a pillar. What kind of pillar? It's a khabar. Natiqun is an adjective, and adjectives are followers. They follow the leader. Who is this adjective for? Is this adjective is for hayawan. So because hayawan is in the rafa state, and natiqun is a follower, it follows the state of hayawan, and therefore it ends up being in the rafa state, and therefore you have a dhamma ending. So dhamma ending here indicates that natiqun is in the rafa state, but it's not in the rafa state because it's a pillar. It's in the rafa state because it's following a pillar. Let's go on to the next one. What if I don't want an adjective? Let's say I want a preposition followed by a noun. Sure, I can do that. Al-mubtada plus khabar plus al-jar plus al-majroor. That's another combination of Jumla Ismiya. Zaydun dhahibun. This is your mubtada, subject, marfu, mu'rab, and the state is reflected by the sign. And dhahibun, again, pillar, and it's inflected, mu'rab, and it has a dhamma ending to indicate that it's in the rafa state. So both of these are pillars. I'm done with my Jumla Ismiya. Zaydun dhahibun. If I say Zaydun dhahibun, then I remain silent. The grammarian will be happy because the grammarian will be saying, okay, great. I've got my two pillars. You're done. You're good. Thumbs up. But then I want to add more information. The grammarian says, sure, you can add as much as information as you want. You can add 1,000,000 words after it. So I say ila to al-jami'ah, to the al-jami'ah. Al-jami'ah is used to mean university. So here you can see Jumla Ismiya comes in different flavors, but in each flavor, there's something common. The two pillars, mubtada and khabar, are always going to be there. Let's go back to fi'liya now. In the fi'liya examples, the bare bones minimum skeleton for a fi'liya is al-fi'l and the fa'il, right? The fi'l and al-fa'il, the doer, or you can say, if you don't want to say al-fa'il, you can also say fa'il, fa'iluhu. That's fine too. It's fa'il, right? The same thing with khabar. Instead of saying al-khabar, if you like, you can say khabaruhu. It's khabar, because the khabar is really for the mubtada, right? So we can change this to say khabaruhu. That's fine. Both expressions are fine. So anyway, coming back to the pillars, yadrusu is a fi'l mudari. Fi'l mudari can have a state. It's mu'rab. What is the state of fi'l mudari? It's got a dhamma ending, therefore it's in the rafa state. And there's a very good reason also for it to be in the rafa state, because the pillar, every verb is a pillar. Unless, of course, you have one of those exceptions, which we will deal with later. But keep that in mind. Every verb by itself is a pillar. It needs a second pillar. Where's the second pillar? Zaydun fa'il. So both of them are in the rafa state. Why? Because they both are pillar. How do I know they're in the rafa state? Well, look, they both are ending with a dhamma ending. And they both are mu'rab, not mabni, inflected. If they were mabni, the signs would not be there. The ending would have some harakah, but it would not be considered a sign. Can I add stuff to al-jumla al-fi'liya? Sure, I can add a million words if I want to. Here we go. Al-fi'l wal-fa'il wal-maf'ul bihi. V for verb, D for doer, O for object. VDO. Remember VDO? We studied this in easy intro to Arabic books, as well as in the previous course, which is the introductory Arabic morphology. VDO, video. Remember, VDO, verb, doer, object, is a very typical syntax. Verb first, then doer. Always verb first, then doer. So yadrusu Zaydun al-kitab. Here we have a maf'ul bihi, which is object. And why is there a fatha on the maf'ul bihi? Because it's not a pillar. If it's not a pillar, what is it? It's a non-pillar. What do we call non-pillar? Fadla. And fadla, the general rule for fadla is that you give it a fatha ending to indicate that it is in the nasab state, right? And this is this inflected? Is this mu'rab or mabni? It's mu'rab because it's an ism and it's not one of those exceptions. Let's look at other combinations of jumla fi'liya. Can I have a dharf and al-mudaf ilayh after? Sure. Remember dharf were containers we study, the place and time containers we study in easy intro to Arabic. So I can have a dharf after a jumla fi'liya. Yadrusu Zaydun ba'd al-fajr. Zayd studies after al-fajr. He reads a verse of the Quran because his teacher, Ustaz Fahim Qadi, told him to read one verse of the Quran every day. So you can see here, fi'il and fa'il, bare bones. Fi'il and fa'il al-maf'ul bihi, VDO. I can have a maf'ul bihi in a jumla fi'liya. And here, if I don't want a maf'ul bihi, I want to describe a time, I can have a dharf. A dharf is a time. So I get yadrusu Zaydun ba'd al-fajr, fi'il, fa'il, dharf, and mudaf ilayh. And the word that comes after the dharf is called al-mudaf ilayh. Now, if you have forgotten mudaf and mudaf ilayh from easy intro to Arabic, that's okay. There's an entire section, there's an entire chapter. We'll do a lesson on that, inshallah. Okay. So usually the dharf ba'da, which is a time, which means after, is not always, but usually followed by an ism majroor, a mudaf ilayh, which is in the jar state. How do I know this word is in the jar state? Because of the kasra ending. Let's look at this one last example. Al-fi'l wal-fa'il wal-jar wal-majroor. So I don't want a maf'ul bihi. I don't want a dharf. I want a preposition. Sure, I can have that. Yadhhabu Zaydun ila al-jami'ah. So ila is harful jar, preposition, and the word that comes after the preposition is ism majroor. They call it ism majroor. Let's call it ismun majroor. And ism majroor is always going to be majroor, which means it's going to be having a kasra ending to indicate that it's in the jar state. And so yadhhabu is pillar, Zaydun is pillar. Yadhhabu is mu'rab, mudari' mu'rab, and Zaydun is also mu'rab. Ila is a harf, therefore it's mabni. Al-jami'ati is an ism, and it's mu'rab because it's not one of those exceptions. So that was it. That was Jumla Ismiya and Fi'liya. So once again, there are only two types of sentences in the Arabic language. You can reclassify the types of sentences in the Arabic language from a rhetorical perspective. In advanced linguistics, we will look at another beautiful way to classify. But regardless of our classification, every single sentence in the Arabic language has to be ismiya or fi'liya. Ismiya, you use it to describe, for definitions, to give information about something or state facts, and fi'liya is used to express occurrence of an action in a particular time or occurrence of a repeated action. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.